The louder they laughed, the harder the silence hits when the feds walk in. That's the sound of justice kicking down the door, chosen one. Now imagine this for a moment. Those same people who mocked you, plotted against you, thought they had you cornered, suddenly finding themselves in a room where every word they once used against you is now being replayed, not as gossip, but as evidence. The tables didn't just turn, they flipped so violently that the entire game shut down. That's not neighborhood revenge. That's federal attention. That's the universe making sure the case is sealed so tightly even their screams can't escape. Here's the fact that burns them the most. Federal investigations don't get involved in small wins. They don't move for petty drama. They step in when the weight of the truth is so undeniable that it threatens to expose more than just individuals. It threatens the structure that protected them. And, chosen one, your victory struck on that level. It was so heavy, so unshakable, that the same system they once thought would shield them became the hammer that nailed their coffin shut. Think about that. Their arrogance wasn't just checked. It was audited, cross-examined, and stamped with case closed. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing the like and subscribe to help spread this message to more souls. It's the responsibility of all of us to spread the light. And thank you, chosen one, for being part of this mission. You are part of a force much bigger than yourself. Now, let's come back. This isn't just about you winning, it's about the level of your win. You didn't just silence the neighborhood chatter, you silenced entire systems that were laughing at you. You hit so hard, the feds themselves had to step in and say, "That's enough. Shut it down." Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how big your impact has to be to make people whose jobs usually involve cartels, billion-dollar fraud, and organized crime turn their eyes in your direction? That's not luck. That's the universe proving a point. Your story became bigger than their lies. You became the headline they never wanted written. And here's the irony. The same people who once acted untouchable are now trapped in rooms without cameras, without exits, where every question slices through their pride like a blade. They thought they had influence. They thought they had protection. But the universe had other plans. The so-called big dogs are now caged, and their reputations are shredded in silence. It almost feels poetic, doesn't it? The same mouths that once mocked you are now whispering desperate excuses to people who couldn't care less about their stories. The same hands that signed against you are now trembling while signing confessions. The same egos that strutted in the light are now shrinking in the shadows. Chosen one, you didn't just walk away with a win. You walked away with a win so undeniable, so permanent, that justice itself stamped it closed. And let's be real, there's a psychological beauty in this. People underestimate how quickly power shifts when truth is undeniable. Research shows that federal cases have conviction rates above 90%. That's not just numbers, that's inevitability. Once the system has enough weight, there's no escape. They're not negotiating anymore. They're not scheming anymore. They're finished. That's why your enemies are panicking. Their chapter is over, while yours is just being written. So when you hear the silence now, don't mistake it for peace. It's not peace, it's the silence of fear, of reputations crumbling behind closed doors, of whispered phone calls that go unanswered. It's the silence of people who thought they'd never be touched, realizing the universe doesn't play favorites. The scales don't bend forever, and when balance strikes, it strikes hard. Chosen one, this isn't neighborhood drama. This isn't petty revenge. This is a victory so loud it echoes in places they never wanted your name to reach. This is the case they can't erase, the justice they can't escape, and the truth they can't rewrite. You won so hard, the feds had to get involved. Case closed. Justice is yours. Chosen One, before we break this down step by step, take a second to lock this moment in. Victories like yours don't come cheap. They come with pressure, with fire, with scars that only the strongest can carry. And that's exactly why you're here. Drop a comment below with the words "Case closed" if you know this message is yours. Show the world you're not just surviving, you're walking proof that justice always finds its way. And if you feel called to fuel this mission, remember, even the smallest gesture keeps this light burning strong for others who need it. Whether it's your time, your words, or your support, it all pushes this movement forward. Because, let's be real, your enemies had power. But you've got something they'll never understand: community, truth, and the universe itself moving in your favor. So stay with me until the end, because if you've come this far, it's not by accident. Every word that follows is a mirror of your journey, and I promise you, when we're done, you'll see your victory from angles you never imagined. And now, let's dive into it, step by step. Chosen One. This is where the story gets even heavier. Number 1. Your victory shattered their illusion of power. They built castles out of lies, and you turned those castles into rubble with one strike. That's the sting, Chosen One. That's the gut punch they never saw coming. They strutted around as if their system was made of iron. But the moment you won, it was like dropping a sledgehammer against rotten wood. It snapped in half, exposing the termites that had been chewing it hollow all along. And the beauty of it? Your win wasn't just personal. It was a mirror held up to their entire structure, showing the world and themselves that the empire they leaned on was nothing more than a paper wall waiting for the right storm. Now, imagine this for a moment. Chosen One. A building looks solid from the outside, tall and intimidating, but inside the beams are cracked, the foundation is crumbling, and the termites are eating it alive. Everyone walks by afraid, thinking it could crush them. But then one person dares to press against it, and the whole thing collapses in front of everyone. That person was you. And that collapse, that was their reality when you won so big that the feds had to step in. Your victory wasn't about scratching the surface. It was about ripping the mask off and revealing what they feared most: exposure. Here's a fact that makes this even sweeter. Federal agencies don't move unless the rot runs deep. They're not called in for neighborhood disputes or petty lies. They're called in when corruption spreads so far it risks poisoning the entire system. That's why your case pulled them in. It wasn't about pitying you. It was about realizing your win cracked open something much larger, something that could no longer be hidden under fake smiles and empty threats. The universe used your fight to shine a light into their shadows, and shadows don't survive light. You might ask, why did your win shake them so badly? Because their power was never real. It was an illusion, propped up by fear, intimidation, and secrecy. They convinced people they were untouchable. They built walls of influence, bought silence with manipulation, and threatened anyone who dared to speak. But here's the truth. Fear is not a foundation, it's quicksand. And when you stood your ground, they sank in it. You exposed that their strength existed only as long as no one dared to challenge it. The second you did, their entire foundation buckled. Think about how humiliating this must feel for them. The same system they thought would protect them turned around and investigated them. That's not just losing, that's betrayal from the very walls they thought were guarding them. The feds didn't come because they cared about protecting their pride. They came because your victory revealed corruption too big to ignore. That's like a king throwing a party in his castle, only for the ceiling to cave in while everyone's watching. No excuses, no hiding, just raw, undeniable exposure. And exposure, chosen one, cuts deeper than punishment. Prison bars can hold a body, but exposure destroys the story they told about themselves. It rips away their fake respect, their false influence, their untouchable reputation. Now, everyone sees what they really were: fragile, hollow, and dirty. They're not feared anymore. They're pitied. They're laughed at. And for people like them, that sting lasts longer than any sentence. Let's be real. This isn't just your win. It's a universal reminder that integrity always outlasts manipulation. They thrived on secrecy, on bending rules, on exploiting cracks in the system. But the moment you stood firm, those cracks split wide open. And what was inside? Rot. Nothing but rot. Your win forced the world to look at it, to smell it, to recognize that what they thought was strength was actually decay. You didn't just prove yourself right, you proved them wrong in front of everyone. Ask yourself this: if their system was so strong, why did it crumble the second you pushed back? Why did it need outside investigators to step in and hold it together? The answer is simple. It was never strong. It was smoke and mirrors, and you were the gust of wind that blew the smoke away. That's why this victory will echo for years to come. Because it wasn't just about winning your fight. It was about proving their entire structure was unsustainable. The deeper truth is, they weren't just exposed to the public. They were exposed to themselves. For the first time, they had to face the mirror without their masks. And what did they see? Not strength, not influence, but guilt, fear, weakness. They had to confront the reality that they never had power. They only had manipulation. And when manipulation was stripped away, there was nothing left. That realization is their real punishment. The feds may have closed the case, but their conscience will replay that collapse forever. Your victory showed the world something people forget. Power without integrity is a ticking time bomb. You can build it high, you can polish it to shine, but if it's rotten at the core, it will explode eventually. And when it explodes, it doesn't just take down individuals, it shakes entire systems to their core. That's what your case did. It wasn't just about you, it was about tearing down the lie they built and reminding everyone that no matter how high they climb, if the foundation is rotten, collapse is inevitable. So, Chosen One, hold this truth tight. Your win wasn't luck, it wasn't chance. It was proof that the universe always balances the scales, even when it looks impossible. You didn't just win, you ripped the curtains down, kicked the walls in, and showed the world that their power was a cardboard cutout. And the feds? They didn't just close the case, they buried the illusion. Justice didn't just whisper, it roared. And that roar will haunt your enemies forever. Number 2, the curtain fell and their fake power disintegrated. They were never kings, just clowns in borrowed crowns. That's the gut punch they're choking on now. For years they strutted around like giants, but giants built on smoke cast no real shadow. And when your case hit, it wasn't just a win, it was demolition. The whole act came crashing down, exposing what everyone should have seen all along. Their power was nothing but illusion, and illusions can't survive the light. Now imagine this: Chosen One. Picture a magician on stage, dazzling the crowd with tricks. Everyone gasps, everyone claps, but then one child in the front row shouts out, "I see the strings!" In that instant, the magic dies. The crowd no longer sees power, they see cheap tricks. That's what your case did. You pulled the strings into the spotlight, and suddenly their towering image shrank to nothing more than a desperate performance. Here's a fact that makes their collapse even heavier. Most illusions only work because people agree to believe in them. Their so-called power survived because everyone was too scared, too tired, or too beaten down to question it. People assumed their reach was endless, that they had protection in every corner, that there would be no consequences. And for a long time, that lie held. But the second real accountability walked into the room. The spell broke. The audience stopped clapping. The mask slipped. And the giants were nothing more than actors caught without a script. Power built on fear is like glass, strong only until the first rock gets thrown. And Chosen One, you were that rock. They leaned on intimidation, threats and manipulation as if those were real bricks of strength. But intimidation is hollow. It has no weight when truth arrives. The second you pressed back, their glass castle shattered into 1,000 pieces. And here's the bitter truth. They weren't just exposed to the world, they were exposed to themselves. For the first time, they had to look in the mirror and realize they had no real strength, no true foundation. Without their tricks, they were small. You might wonder, why does their downfall matter so much? Because illusions aren't just lies, they're cages. People lived under their shadow, afraid to breathe wrong, believing that resistance was impossible. Your case didn't just prove them weak, it freed others who were trapped by their performance. Imagine standing in front of a wall that everyone says is impenetrable. Then you push it with one hand, and it topples like cardboard. Suddenly, everyone realizes the wall was never real. That's what you did. Your win tore down the false walls, and now no one can pretend they were strong again. Arrogance makes cowards look tall until truth cuts them down to size. For years, they even believed their own act. That's the twisted part. They rehearsed their performance so long that they forgot it was a performance. They wore their masks so tightly that they convinced themselves the mask was their real face. But when your victory arrived, it ripped the mask clean off. And the exposure sliced deeper than any punishment because it forced them to confront the emptiness inside. Think about this. What happens to people who only know how to manipulate when manipulation fails? What happens to those who only know how to threaten when fear no longer works? They crumble. That's why their downfall was so pathetic. They weren't warriors stripped of weapons. They were children caught playing dress-up. And once the curtain fell, everyone saw them for what they were: weak, desperate, and terrified. Now imagine this: Chosen One. A lion painted on a wall might scare people walking by, until one day someone touches it and realizes it's just paint, not flesh. That's what your case revealed. Their power had no bite, no roar, no teeth. It was just paint on the wall of people's imagination. Once the paint faded, so did their image. And there's no repainting it now, because truth doesn't allow illusions to rebuild once they're destroyed. Here's another sting that keeps them awake at night. People who once bowed to them now laugh at them. Fear turned to ridicule, respect turned to pity, and humiliation cuts deeper than any sentence. They can't go back to the image they worked so hard to protect. Once the curtain is ripped down, it can't be hung back up. That's why your victory wasn't just justice, it was permanent destruction of their reputation. They'll spend the rest of their days trying to convince people they still matter, but everyone knows the truth now. Illusion dissolves where reality stands tall. And Chosen One, your case was reality at its strongest. It proved what real strength looks like, not manipulation, not fear, but truth under pressure. They failed that test miserably. Every lie they stacked, every trick they rehearsed, every false layer of power, they all collapsed once the weight of your truth stacked against them. Illusion crumbles under pressure. Reality doesn't break. That's why you stand tall now, and they're crawling in the ruins of their own lies. And here's the irony. They'll never stop replaying this collapse in their minds, because it wasn't just exposure in public, it was exposure in private. They now know the truth of who they are, and they can't escape it. Even if they manage to fool a few people again, they'll never fool themselves. They've seen the strings, they've seen the hollow core, and once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. So Chosen One, remember this. Your case didn't just bring justice, it shattered an empire built on smoke. It reminded everyone that power without truth is temporary, fragile, doomed. They strutted like giants. But your win showed them as they really are, clowns in crowns, puppets tangled in their own strings, shadows running from the light. And the universe itself stamped the verdict. Case closed, illusion demolished, justice yours. Number 3, your existence became the evidence that buried them. They wanted you erased, but your survival became the loudest receipt. That's the sting that keeps them awake, Chosen One. Every scar they left, every night they thought you wouldn't make it, every silence they mistook for defeat. It all turned into evidence, solid and undeniable. What they mocked as weakness became the weapon that ripped through their lies. Your survival wasn't quiet. It roared so loud that even federal ears had no choice but to listen. Now imagine this, a crime scene wiped clean, every fingerprint scrubbed, every trace hidden. The culprits walk away smug, convinced they've beaten the system. But then, standing in the doorway, is the one thing they can't erase. You, alive. Your very presence was the bloodstain they couldn't bleach, the footprint they couldn't cover. You didn't just survive, you became the crime scene itself, walking into every room as living proof of what they had done. Here's a fact they'll never escape. Survival is evidence that can't be forged. Documents can be shredded, witnesses can be bribed, reports can be doctored, but your heartbeat, your persistence, untouchable. Every day you refused to disappear was another sworn statement against them, one no lawyer could cross-examine away. That's why the feds paid attention. They weren't just looking at paper, they were looking at you, Chosen One, and your existence said everything they tried to bury. You might ask, why was survival so powerful? Because it flipped their whole narrative. They wanted to call you broken, ruined, silenced, but the longer you stood, the more obvious it became that you were unbreakable. Your presence alone shattered their defense. It proved that what happened wasn't exaggeration, wasn't rumor, it was real and it was brutal. And here's the cruel twist for them. The very thing they thought proved their control. The fact that you were still alive ended up proving the opposite. It proved they failed. Survival is the testimony no court can dismiss. Every time you walked in, you brought the receipts with you, in your scars, in your story, in your refusal to bow. That's why their empire fell apart. Because when survival speaks, it speaks louder than any expert, louder than any witness, louder than the liars trying to rewrite history. You became the living contradiction to every lie they told, and no jury, no system, no investigator could look away. And here's the sharpest cut. They can't erase you, so the system erased them. That's the irony that will haunt them forever, that your survival wasn't just resistance, it was the very evidence that closed the case and buried their illusion of power for good. Number 4. Justice couldn't function without you holding the line. The system wasn't protecting you, it was collapsing until you forced it to stand up straight. That's the sting they can't ignore. Chosen One, justice didn't just side with you, it depended on you. For years, the machine of law creaked along, clogged with corruption, weighed down by compromise, bending for those who knew how to twist it. But when your fight came crashing into its gears, it was forced to turn in the direction it was always meant to go. You weren't just a case, you were the pressure point that made justice do its job. Now imagine this, a massive clock tower, its gears rusting, its hands stuck, while everyone on the street assumes it's still keeping time. The system looked the same, majestic, official, unshakable. But inside, shortcuts, blind eyes, and corruption had jammed the gears. Then came your fight, sharp as a hammer. With every strike, you knocked loose the rust, forced the gears to move, and made the clock tick again. That's what your persistence did. You didn't just win, you repaired what was broken. Here's the truth no one likes to admit. Justice on paper means nothing without people willing to stand in the fire for it. Laws exist, rules exist, but if no one pushes, they sit idle. Your survival, your receipts, your unshakable refusal to bend became the push the system needed. Without you, the gaps would have stayed hidden, the corruption would have spread deeper, and those who hurt you would still be walking free, laughing in the shadows. You weren't just another name on the docket. You became the spine the system had lost. Real justice doesn't beg to exist. It demands someone strong enough to pull it into the light. That's why your presence in that fight mattered so much. Every objection they raised, every lie they tried to slip through only backfired, making your role more essential. The system couldn't ignore you without crumbling completely. You became the proof that it still had a pulse. You were the test, and without passing it, the courts themselves would have been guilty of moral collapse. And that's why this victory runs deeper than your own survival. It wasn't just your name being cleared, it was the integrity of the entire process being restored. Justice didn't just side with you, it needed you. Because without your persistence, accountability would have remained negotiable, and the scales would have tipped forever in the wrong direction. Instead, you forced them to balance. You reminded them of their purpose. You dragged truth back into the courtroom. And in doing so, you didn't just win, you rebuilt what they tried to destroy. Number 5. They weren't taken down by whispers, they were crushed by receipts. Rumors sting for a day, but receipts bury for a lifetime. That's the wound they'll never recover from, Chosen One. For years they thrived on gossip, manipulation, and half-truths. They thought if they controlled the whispers, they could control the world. But whispers are fragile. They vanish with the wind. What doesn't vanish is evidence. And when the receipts surfaced, their entire facade collapsed like a tower of cards caught in a storm. Now imagine this, a castle built not on stone, but on fog. From a distance, it looks solid, intimidating. People point and say, "Look at their power." But when the sunlight hits, the fog dissolves, and nothing remains. That's what happened when your case dragged the receipts into the open. Every document, every email, every record, like rays of truth slicing through their fog, revealed the hollow structure they'd been hiding behind. Their fortress of gossip turned out to be nothing more than mist, evaporated by the heat of reality. Here's a fact they can't deny. Rumors can be argued, but proof cannot. Every screenshot, every testimony, every record stacked one after the other until the weight became unbearable. That's why their reputation didn't just wobble, it imploded. They had built their image on perception, but perception collapses under the gravity of truth, and truth showed up armed with receipts. The very tools they used to spin lies became the shackles that chained them to reality. That's the irony that cuts deepest. The same messages they sent, the same words they spoke, the same manipulations they thought no one would catch. Those became the very evidence that dismantled them. They tried to weaponize stories, but it was their own history that became the blade against their throat. And you might ask, why did it have to be receipts that finished them? Because receipts are unarguable. Rumors fade, opinions shift, but cold, undeniable facts cut through every excuse. The system couldn't look away. The people watching couldn't dismiss it. Their downfall wasn't about perception anymore. It was about undeniable reality, and reality doesn't negotiate. So, Chosen One, remember this. Their reputation didn't crumble because someone whispered against them. It shattered because the receipts screamed louder than their lies. Every page of proof was a hammer pounding their false image into dust. They weren't undone by rumor. They were buried under the weight of their own truth, exposed for all to see, with no way back. Number 6. Your fight became the mirror that exposed every hidden predator. They thought the shadows would protect them until your case turned the shadows into a spotlight. That's the wound that never closes for them, Chosen One. Your battle didn't just close one case, it cracked open an entire world of hidden predators who had been thriving in silence. Suddenly, every manipulator, every abuser, every backroom exploiter had to look in the mirror of your victory and ask, what if I'm next? And that fear, that's justice stretching its reach. Now imagine this, a crowded room where predators move freely because the lights are dim. They laugh, they plot, they feel invincible in the dark. Then one person flips on the switch and instantly every face is exposed. People freeze, secrets spill, the comfort of shadows evaporates. That's what your case did. You weren't just defending yourself, you dragged the whole environment into the light, forcing every hidden face to confront the fact that they can be seen. Here's the fact that shakes them. Predators only thrive when they believe invisibility is guaranteed. But invisibility dies the moment someone refuses to stay silent. Your survival, your courage, your receipts became a permanent reminder that the universe always has someone willing to fight back. And when one person refuses to bow, it becomes a signal for others to stand. That's why your case was bigger than your name. It was a warning shot fired into every shadow. Predators are powerful only until they're seen, then they shrink to the size of their lies. That's what happened here. Every enabler, every cover-up artist, every silent witness who thought they'd never be questioned suddenly felt the ripple. They weren't just watching your case, they were watching themselves on trial in advance. And the truth is, that ripple didn't stop at the courtroom doors. It traveled outward, into boardrooms, into back offices, into homes where secrets had been kept for years. You didn't just win, you created an atmosphere where accountability is no longer optional. And you might ask, why does this matter? Because predators build their power on repetition. They rely on the idea that no one will ever challenge them, that silence will protect them forever. Your case shattered that cycle. It proved silence can break, and when it does, it's louder than any scream. Suddenly, their untouchable status dissolved. They saw how quickly power could flip, how quickly a hidden act could become federal evidence, and how rapidly lies could collapse under exposure. So, Chosen One, understand this. Your victory wasn't just about justice for you. It was a mirror shoved in the face of every predator hiding in the dark. You forced them to see themselves, trembling, exposed, and vulnerable. And the lesson is eternal. The world is watching, the shadows are no longer safe, and justice, once summoned, spares no one. Number 7. The fall of their image was a life sentence they can't escape. Prison ends with release, but humiliation is a sentence with no parole. That's what cuts them the deepest, Chosen One. They could have survived prison time. They could have paid fines. They could have even endured restrictions. But what they couldn't survive was the collapse of their image, the slow, suffocating destruction of the false aura they had built around themselves for years. They lived for perception, thrived on intimidation, and worshipped influence. And you took all of that away in one crushing blow. Now imagine this. A king thrown into a dungeon still believes he's a king. But a king stripped of his crown in front of his people, that man never rules again. That's exactly what your victory did. You didn't just lock them up. You ripped the crown off their head in front of the world. The illusion of invincibility shattered, and with it, their only true weapon, the belief that they were untouchable. Here's the truth that makes this punishment unbearable for them. Prison is temporary. Reputations once destroyed are eternal. Every person who once bowed, feared, or praised them now looks with contempt. Every handshake feels empty. Every room they enter buzzes with whispers they can't silence. They're haunted not by walls or bars, but by the looks of people who know the truth. Their punishment is psychological, not physical, and that's why it hurts more than confinement ever could. The world can forgive mistakes, but it never forgets exposure. That's the chain they carry now. Their arrogance has been replaced by desperation. Their swagger has turned into shame. And the cruelest part? They can't manipulate their way out of it anymore. Their power relied on image, and once that image dissolved, so did their ability to control. You might ask, why does public exposure sting more than prison? Because exposure destroys the story they told about themselves. It rewrites their legacy in ink that never fades. Bars can eventually open, but reputations don't regenerate. They'll be remembered not as leaders, not as untouchables, but as frauds who were dragged into the light and stripped bare. That humiliation is the real life sentence, one your victory delivered with precision. So, Chosen One, know this. Your win didn't just punish them. It ruined what they valued most. They feared losing power more than losing freedom. And in the end, you didn't just defeat them, you rewrote their identity, branding them forever as the cautionary tale they swore they'd never become. Number 8. You shattered the pact of silence they hid behind. Silence protects predators until truth rips the gag out of its mouth. That's the scar your enemies will carry forever, Chosen One. For years they thrived, not just because of their own lies, but because of the silence of everyone around them. Neighbors who looked away, colleagues who pretended not to hear, friends who knew but said nothing. That silence wasn't innocent. It was a contract, an unspoken deal that traded comfort for complicity. And they counted on it lasting forever. But your case ripped that contract to pieces, and once it was broken, there was no going back. Now imagine this, a room filled with people who all know a secret, but no one dares to speak. The air is heavy, suffocating but stable, until one voice finally breaks through the silence. Suddenly, the room shifts. Eyes drop, faces pale. The comfort of denial shatters, and the truth spills out like floodwater. That was your role. You didn't just speak, you made silence itself collapse. Here's the truth they never wanted to face. Silence is never neutral. It's fuel for corruption, a shield for abusers, and a prison for victims. But the moment you refused to play along, silence lost its power. Your courage forced witnesses, allies, and even passive onlookers to confront themselves. Could they keep quiet now, knowing the truth was exposed? Could they live with the guilt of enabling? The answer was no. Your fight turned their silence into testimony, their fear into acknowledgement, their complicity into evidence. The loudest sound in a courtroom is often the silence that finally breaks. And Chosen One, you forced that break. Every corroboration, every confession, every piece of acknowledgement stacked onto your truth until the walls of denial crumbled. You didn't just win a case, you detonated the foundation that made their corruption possible. And here's the psychological dagger. Once silence is broken, it never comes back the same. People who once hid in shadows now live with the weight of what they allowed. They can't unhear the truth. They can't unsee what was exposed. And that guilt, that awareness, burns far longer than fear ever did. Your victory wasn't just about punishing them, it was about dismantling the ecosystem that protected them. You proved a brutal fact. Silence only rules when it's unchallenged. The second someone dares to reject it, the illusion disintegrates. You didn't just reject it, you obliterated it, and in doing so, you set a standard that silence has limits, and those limits will always be shattered by truth. Number 9. Their collapse was more than a verdict. It was total soul bankruptcy. A prison term ends, but a bankrupt spirit never recovers. That's the wound your enemies can't patch, Chosen One. Their downfall wasn't just about courtrooms, sentences, or fines. It was the complete evaporation of whatever essence they once had. For years, they spent their energy like reckless gamblers, trading truth for lies, selling integrity for control, burning through trust like it was infinite. And when the bill came due, they had nothing left to pay with. That wasn't just legal defeat. That was spiritual bankruptcy, an emptiness that no appeal can overturn. Now imagine this, a merchant with glittering stalls selling false gold to the crowd. He grows rich, adored, feared even. But every piece he sells chips away at his real wealth. One day, the crowd finally tests the gold and finds it fake. In that instant, his coins, his power, his status, they're worthless. He isn't just broke financially, he's exposed as hollow. That was them. Your victory was the test that revealed their gold-plated lies, and the world saw that the vault was empty all along. Here's the truth that burns deeper than bars. Power isn't just about money or titles. It's about credibility, integrity, and unseen weight. They traded all of that for manipulation and fear. They thought they were clever, untouchable, eternal. But every lie drained them. Every deception hollowed them out. By the time the gavel struck, they were already shells. The legal sentence was just confirmation of what the universe had written long before. They had bankrupted their very essence. When you sell your soul for control, the debt always comes due, with interest. That's why their collapse resonates beyond headlines. The system punished them legally, but the deeper punishment was exposure of their emptiness. No trust left, no moral weight, no credibility. People don't just see them as criminals, they see them as nothing. That's a collapse prison walls can't contain because it follows them everywhere. You might wonder, could they rebuild? Could they claw back power? The answer is no. Money can be re-earned, status can be faked. But once people see the emptiness at your core, there's no disguising it again. They're spiritually bankrupt, forever overdrawn in the one currency that matters. Your victory made sure the world saw it. And that exposure is permanent. So, Chosen One, understand this. Your triumph wasn't just about law. It was about balance. The universe cashed the debt they'd been dodging for years, and it left them stripped, hollow, and irreversibly ruined. They weren't just defeated, they were declared bankrupt in the only court that truly matters, the court of truth. And that's a sentence they'll never escape. Number 10. You turned corruption into a coward before its own reflection. The monster they fed for years finally saw itself in the mirror, and it flinched. That's the scar you carved into them, Chosen One. For decades, corruption thrived on shadows. It grew fat on silence, bold on secrecy, and smug on the belief that no light could ever reach it. But your fight forced that monster to look at its own face, and what it saw wasn't dominance. It was fear, fragility, and the undeniable truth that it could be destroyed the same way you destroyed them. Now imagine this. A thief who's always walked through crowds unnoticed suddenly sees his face plastered across every wall. Every step he takes, he wonders who's watching, who's whispering, who's ready to point. That's what your victory did. It turned their comfort into paranoia. The same people who once moved confidently in the dark now stumble in fear of their own reflection, because the mirror you raised doesn't go away. Here's the brutal fact. They weren't afraid of punishment as much as they were afraid of exposure. Punishment is the aftermath. Exposure is the death of their illusion. And when your case dragged truth into the open, it wasn't just the guilty who trembled, it was everyone tied to the same web of corruption. They saw themselves in your fight, and for the first time, they had to ask, what if I'm next? Corruption thrives on certainty. You killed its certainty with doubt. That's the disruption you unleashed. Before you, they moved with the assurance that no one would dare challenge them. After you, every deal, every lie, every manipulation felt like a risk. You didn't just win, you cracked the ecosystem that kept them comfortable. They began to second guess, to hesitate, to stumble, and hesitation is death for corruption. And you might ask, why does this matter beyond your case? Because corruption is a machine. It needs momentum, it needs complacency, it needs silence to survive. You broke all three. Your persistence stopped its wheels. Your courage shattered its silence, and your victory proved that even the untouchable can be dragged into the light. That mirror you raised now hangs over them all, reflecting back their own fragility, their own cowardice, their own inevitable collapse. So, Chosen One, know this. Your win wasn't just a verdict, it was a warning. You didn't just hold them accountable, you reshaped the landscape itself. Corruption now trembles at its own shadow, afraid of the day your mirror swings back its way. And the beauty of it, that fear doesn't fade. It lingers, it festers, it spreads. You made corruption afraid of itself, and that is a legacy no system can erase. Number 11. Justice didn't creep in. It thundered through the walls. They thought justice was asleep until it woke up roaring louder than their lies. That's the bruise they'll never recover from. Chosen One. People like to complain that the system is too slow, that justice drags while predators keep moving unchecked. But your case proved something far more devastating. The silence wasn't weakness, it was build-up. Every delay was pressure. Every obstacle was fuel. And when the hammer finally dropped, it didn't just strike. It exploded like thunder, rattling the halls where corruption once felt safe. Now imagine this, a storm gathering over days, clouds thickening, winds rising. People laugh at it, thinking it's just weather, nothing serious. Then, without warning, lightning splits the sky and thunder shakes the ground beneath their feet. That's how justice arrived for them. Not late, not weak, but loud enough to make even the most arrogant flinch. Your victory was that storm, the strike that silenced years of whispers in one earth-shattering moment. Here's the fact they can't spin. Justice doesn't have to be fast to be effective. It has to be precise. And your case hit with surgical accuracy. The timing wasn't random. It was perfect. Every lie they leaned on, every delay they celebrated, every whisper they thought protected them, obliterated the second truth hit the table. That loudness wasn't metaphorical. It was documented proof, public records, headlines that echoed far beyond their reach. No corner was quiet enough to hide from the blast of your win. Justice is feared most when it's silent before the strike, and that's why they're broken now. They thought the quiet meant safety. They mistook patience for weakness, but the system wasn't failing. It was sharpening the blade. And when it swung, it cut clean through their defenses. They weren't just exposed, they were humiliated by the sound of their collapse, reverberating through every circle that once thought they were untouchable. And you might ask, why does the loudness matter? Because silence can be ignored, but thunder forces acknowledgement. People felt your victory. They didn't just read it in documents, they heard it in conversations, saw it in news feeds, felt it in their bones. That resonance wasn't just for you. It was a warning shot to every onlooker, every enabler, every future offender. Justice may take its time, but when it arrives louder than anything you can hide behind. So, Chosen One, let this truth sink in. Your triumph didn't whisper. It roared. It didn't just end a case, it rewrote expectations. Justice didn't crawl to you, it stampeded, explosive and undeniable, leaving their empire in ruins and their legacy drowned out by the thunder of your win. Number 12. You didn't just win a case, you rewired the course of history. Some victories fade into court archives. Yours carved itself into the spine of history. That's the weight of what you accomplished, Chosen One. This wasn't about walking out of a courtroom with a verdict stamped in your favor. It wasn't about a single moment of justice. What you did detonated far beyond four walls. It redrew the map of what's possible when truth refuses to be buried. Now imagine this. A single stone hurled into a still lake. The ripples don't stop at the point of impact. They spread, touching shores you can't even see. Your case was that stone. The shockwaves reached systems, institutions, communities, and individuals who thought they could forever swim in silence. You made sure no corner stayed untouched. What once felt like business as usual was destroyed because your victory proved corruption can't hide behind tradition, silence, or intimidation forever. Here's the fact that makes this monumental. History doesn't remember whispers, it remembers ruptures, and you ruptured a system that had grown too comfortable. By tearing the veil off manipulation and abuse, you didn't just close a case, you forced a cultural correction. The way people view accountability has been rewritten because of you. No predator, no manipulator, no corrupt player can operate with the same ease again, because your fight left a scar on the narrative itself. Precedent is the shadow of courage. It follows long after the fight is done. That's what you created. Your courage became a legal and cultural landmark, something others will lean on when they demand justice. You left behind more than evidence. You left behind a framework, a living reminder that silence, fear, and influence are brittle when truth stands unbroken. And you might wonder, why does this matter for those beyond your story? Because history is a teacher, and your case became the lesson. Institutions that once turned a blind eye now know the cost of negligence. Communities that once cowered in silence now understand the power of standing up. Even individuals who once thought themselves immune now live with the awareness that exposure is always one step away. Chosen one, you didn't just win for yourself, you shifted the balance for everyone who comes after. You drew a line that can't be erased. You forced accountability to become louder than corruption. You turned your struggle into a permanent marker in history's timeline, one that says, truth always recalibrates the system. So understand this, your victory didn't just close a chapter, it rewrote the entire book, and every page that follows carries the weight of what you proved, that no lie lasts forever, no predator escapes forever, and no system stays broken when someone dares to fight until the end. Number 13. They weren't just crushed, they were carved into the record forever. Defeat can fade. Documentation is eternal. That's the dagger they'll never pull out, chosen one. They thought losing to you would be a temporary bruise, something they could spin, bury, or outlive. But your victory didn't just end them, it etched their downfall into stone. Every lie they told, every manipulation they ran, every abuse they thought would vanish into whispers has now been preserved in black and white. Their shame isn't just personal, it's public, permanent, and undeniable. Now imagine this, a tyrant trying to rewrite history, burning scrolls, silencing witnesses, destroying evidence. But somewhere, carved into unbreakable stone, the truth remains. No fire can erase it. No bribe can cover it. No lie can overwrite it. That's what your case became. The official record, the rulings, the evidence, the testimony turned their defeat into an immortal scar. Anyone, years from now, who looks back will see their name chained to corruption, abuse, and failure. That's not just defeat, that's eternal humiliation. Here's the fact that terrifies them most. Power can be rebuilt, reputations can sometimes be patched, but records never die. Public records don't forget. They sit there, silent and immovable, testifying long after the courtroom is empty. And now, every time their name is spoken, it drags behind it a trail of documented shame. They're no longer remembered as powerful, untouchable, or respected. They're remembered as frauds, manipulators, and predators whose crimes were carved into history. A lie can dance for a season, but a record stands for eternity. That's why their legacy is finished. No apology, no spin campaign, no act of desperation can erase what you forced into the light. They can try to distract, to move on, to rebuild. But the trail is there, and it points straight at them. And worse, it points to their failure against you. Chosen One, understand the scale of this. You didn't just win a battle, you left behind a monument. Defeat could have been forgotten, but documentation immortalized it. You didn't just silence them in the moment, you guaranteed that their names will forever carry the weight of their crimes. You turned their ending into a permanent record, a warning, and a stain that no amount of power will ever bleach away. Their downfall isn't just history, it's history written in permanent ink. And you, Chosen One, are the author who made sure it can never be erased. Chosen One, what you've just heard isn't just a story. It's your proof that victory is real, lasting and louder than every lie told against you. Remember, they weren't just defeated, they were documented, and history will never forget who truly won. If this message hit your spirit, press that like button if you haven't already. And if you're still not part of this family, make sure to subscribe right now. Together, we spread truth wider, louder, and stronger than ever. Thank you for standing here with us. You are proof that justice always finds its way home.